Cézanne said,
"Titian is like a page out of Shakespeare."
and painting turns into drama. A jealous husband stabs his wife. The place, Padua, in 1511. Titian is just 20, and the first signs of violence are emerging in his work. A former pupil of Bellini and of Giorgione, he no longer needs a master. In only 13 days, he illustrates the power of faith for the Scuola della Basilica di San Antonio. He stages a drama full of suspicion, jealousy, and murder, with a surprising ending. St. Anthony cures a young man who has cut off his leg as punishment for striking his mother. The witnesses to this miracle are no longer depicted as mere liturgical props, but as contemporaries of the painter. Titian dresses the actors of a 300-year-old legend in contemporary clothes, and so brings them to life. He employs a similar device when St. Anthony bestows the gift of speech to the newborn child, so that he can exonerate his mother suspected of adultery. A mixture of the mundane and the fantastic, reinforcing the faith of the believer and thus strengthening the power of the Church. In Padua, Titian provides proof of his talent. You only have to compare his work with that of his contemporary, Gian Antonio Corona, who in the same year paints this other fresco for the Scuola. His figures seem rigid, frozen. But Venice provides Titian with a new dramatic setting. Venice at that time is a troubled city, as is shown in this painting where St. Mark's head is hidden in the shadows. A Venice under the shadow of war since 1508, and plague in 1504, 1507, and 1510. The painter and art historian Vasari reports,
"He painted a St. Mark seated amid the saints in Santo Spirito. Some of the faces are painted in oil and are executed with great accuracy. Many believe this panel was the work of Giorgione."
In 1510, Giorgione dies of the plague at the age of 33. Titian and Giorgione were frequent collaborators, so their paintings are often indistinguishable. Was this Madonna started by Giorgione and only finished by Titian, who added the mountains of his native land? Vasari writes about Giorgione,
"For Giorgione, there was no better way of painting or drawing than to apply his colors directly onto the paper without preliminary sketches."
Giorgione's approach in this picture is also adopted by Titian. But such intimacy between two painters is not possible without conflict. Giorgione's death finally sets Titian on the path to fame. But Giorgione's example is not enough for Titian. He wants to add an expressive power of his own. He brings the saints closer together and gives them the faces of his contemporaries. Is St. Bridget not Violante, the daughter of the painter Palma? And isn't St. Ulf's face that of Titian himself? Before discovering the manner and style of Giorgione's work, Titian had learned about the craft and the chemistry of painting from Giovanni Bellini, at the time the most highly regarded painter in Venice. Vasari writes,
As soon as he discovered Giorgione's method and style, Titian abandoned those of Giovanni Bellini, even though he had spent a long time on them.
This Virgin, by Giovanni Bellini, has the slightly static grace of icons, or Byzantine mosaics. Venice, the gateway to the Orient. In 1516, on the death of Bellini and after a great many intrigues, Titian manages to secure the same privileges from the Senate of Venice that his former master had enjoyed, namely 120 ducats a year, to execute official commissions and paint the portraits of the doges. Artists would see themselves as princes, and like princes they vie with each other for supremacy and rewards. Titian, ambitious, skillful, and cunning, now covets the fame of the great Roman artists. On the 25th of March, 1518, at the Santa Maria dei Frari, this Assumption of the Virgin is unveiled. It causes an outcry. Such powerful painting has never before been seen in Venice. A triumph of color. And apostles who behave as if they were just part of any Venetian crowd, jostling each other in a rather unholy manner for a better view. Man, angel, saint, and God perform on the same platform. A noisy scene, and a challenge to Michelangelo, whose frescoes are familiar from popular engravings. And Titian lets his faint-hearted patrons know that an envoy of the Emperor Maximilian is quite prepared to buy this painting, which they find so perplexing. His blackmail works. The picture remains in Venice, and he receives his payment. The crowds of Venetians who come to look at the painting are stunned. Titian's enterprise continues with a challenge to the divine Raphael. In 1521, he gives Luigi Gozzi the part of a penitent in a setting inspired by Raphael's Madonna di Foligno. The patron of this work is neither a celebrated war hero nor a genius. He is a merchant from Ancona. And despite being the patron, as a mere mortal he must not see the Virgin. Only St. Blasius and St. Francis can gaze at her. Out of a votive picture, Titian creates a drama. A fig tree, the symbol of original sin, unites the world of the merchant with the great trading city, ruled over by divine apparitions. Titian simply ignores the towns of Ragusa and Ancona, where his client made his fortune, and depicts Venice, his town. Venice in all her glory. In December 1526, Titian completes this picture of Admiral Pesaro, who defeated the Turks in 1502. This sacra conversazione between mortals and saints takes place in the splendid theatre of the Frari Basilica. Usually, these holy conversations aim to give the spectator the impression that he too is taking part. But here, by contrast, the protagonists are on show purely for their own benefit. The Pesaros do not share their privileges. They put on a performance simply to display the magnificence of their clothes. This painting is a votive picture. At the same time, it celebrates a victory and pays tribute to a noble family. It lends expression to the pride of a city at a time when her supremacy is already being challenged. Titian's position, too, is being challenged. He is up against a formidable rival, Pordenone. The art historian Ridolfi reports,
Pordenone was commissioned to decorate the chapel of the Church of San Rocco, where he depicted the Transfiguration. Rumor has it that while he worked, he at all times kept his sword and his shield by his side for fear of being attacked by Titian's acolytes.
Titian gained the upper hand, however, over this painter who had already killed a man in a fight by presenting to the Venetians in April 1530 a most violent work, St. Peter Martyr. Pordenone dies in Ferrara in 1539 at the court of Alfonso d'Este. His sudden death gives rise to rumors that he was poisoned. In 1877, Titian's work is destroyed in the fire that sweeps through the church of San Giovanni e San Paolo. This engraving is the only reminder. In 1534, Titian stages another theatrical scene, complete with props, scenery, and actors. Vasari writes,
For the Scuola Santa Maria della Carità, he painted a Madonna climbing the steps to the temple, along with all sorts of portraits drawn from nature.
For this painting, the same instructions apply that 60 years later, Shakespeare has Hamlet give his actors.
Be not too tame, neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance, that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so overdone is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is to hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. Now this overdone, or come tardy off, though it make the unskilful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of which one must in your allowance o'erweigh a whole theatre of others.
Venice, theatre and trading centre, serves as a setting for Ecce Homo. It is commissioned by the Flemish merchant Giovanni Dana. Titian paints this Ecce Homo in 1543, the same year Copernicus puts forward his theory that the earth revolves around the sun. The church, determined to shepherd her flock back into the fold, takes a very strong stand against these revolutionary ideas. Titian fills this scene with Venetians. Pietro Aretino, poet, polemicist, and self-appointed flagellator of princes, is cast in the role of Pilate, bringing forward the flagellated Christ. The Church of Santa Maria della Salute is built by the Venetians between 1631 and 1681 to thank the Virgin Mary for having put an end to the plague of 1630. It holds a number of paintings originally painted by Titian for the Santo Spirito Church. Vasari writes,
in 1541, Titian painted the Descent of the Holy Spirit among the Apostles for the high altar of the Santo Spirito order in Venice. But the painting soon deteriorated, and after a good deal of protest, Titian had to do it again.
He may therefore be the first painter to restore his own work. But over the years, time, inevitably, has taken its revenge. The painter Eugène Delacroix comments,
imagine these extraordinary works when the delicacy of touch, the blending, the veracity, and the incredible brilliance of the colors were still fresh, and the ravages of time and the inevitable accidents that occur had not yet taken their toll.
So many Titians lost, destroyed, damaged. In 1571, the Last Supper in the convent of San Giovanni, San Paolo, is burnt. In 1577, 4 other paintings are destroyed in a fire at the Doge's palace. And in 1578, the Nativity in the Basilica of San Marco is burnt. And Titian paints fire, as if to exorcise it. In the Baroque decor of the Church of the Jesuits, built at the beginning of the 18th century, a painting of gloomy darkness and fire illuminates his tragic theatre. Titian stages a story from the Legenda Aurea, the Golden Legend. There it is written that St. Lawrence, as he was being roasted alive, said to his torturer,
I am roasted enough on this side. Turn me over.
the light of faith vanquishing darkness. And to the threat, submit to the gods or you will spend the night in torment, Lawrence replies,
My night knows no darkness. All is radiant with light.
8 years later, Titian sends another version of this painting to Philip II of Spain, where the flames of the Inquisition are being fanned. This 15th century engraved and gilded silver reredos is only shown to the Venetians twice a year, on the 3rd and the 15th of August. The rest of the year it is concealed behind a Transfiguration by Titian. The painting rises as the curtain does in the theatre. Vasari reports,
For another altar in the same church of San Salvatore, Titian painted an Annunciation. But he did not think highly of his later works. Although they had their merits, they are not as perfect as the others.
Posterity shares neither Titian's nor Vasari's opinion. This is the said Annunciation. The light of the Holy Spirit, descending from the sky amid a chaos of clouds and angels, illuminates another aspect of Titian's drama. The Virgin looks terrified. Behind her, the sky blazes. For Titian, who is over 75 years old, painting at the service of religion no longer holds any hope or consolation. It expresses terror, mortal terror. It's a long way from that Annunciation painted more than 20 years earlier, far from the humble acceptance of the Virgin, who is only touched by a thin ray of light. For Titian, Venice is not only a theatre lit by sweetness and sensuality. She also has a darker side. And when old age finally overcomes the painter, his works become dominated by the depiction of death. Titian portrays himself as Joseph of Arimathea, holding the body of the dead Christ. He sends this entombment to Philip II of Spain in 1559. 7 years later, he sends another version of this painting to the king. Philip is obsessed by death and surrounds himself with the rotting bodies of his ancestors in the still unfinished Escorial. Jacopo Palma writes,
Titian regarded his paintings as though they were his mortal enemies.
His later work deals predominantly with the death of Christ, with pain, with the Pietà. He paints this Pietà for a chapel of the Frari, the sanctuary where he wishes to be buried. But he dies on the 27th of August, 1576. Jacopo Palma the Younger completes the painting. When Titian dies, the plague is ravaging Venice once again. We know nothing of his burial. This tomb, designed by Antonia Canova in the middle of the 19th century, is empty. Titian's date of birth is unknown. Was it 1477, 1488, or 1490? But we know his place of birth, Pieve di Cadore, a small town in the Dolomites, which chose to become part of the Republic of Venice. He came from a well-to-do family of landowners and notables. Why, then, did the young Tiziano Vecellio set off for Venice? Who decided that he would be a painter? Only one thing is certain: his love for his native land. He chooses a house in Venice so that he can look out on the Dolomites. And his journey from Pieve di Cadore to Venice appears also in the background of the St. Christopher, commissioned by the Doge Andrea Gritti for his private apartments.